Well, on February 9th, 2008, Kelly Sammy took her own life at just 38 years of age. Most of us would call it a near-death experience, but Kelly will tell you no, she actually did die. It wasn't her time to leave this physical world, however, and she was sent back. That was 12 years ago, and today she joins us to talk about her life since. Hello, Kelly.
Hi, Dean. Good to be here with you.
Great to have you here. Okay, so let's just wind back the clock 12 years and let's summarize what took place on that day.
Yeah, I won't spend a ton of time talking about, what led up to that, but we will just say that a life of victimhood and a life of thinking everything was happening to me led up to ultimately creating in a diseased mind an idea or a concept that my family and my life would be better off without me. Um, and through that diseased mind, proceeded to plan and carry out the act of suicide. Stored medication for a while, prepared for this, and not being a drinker, I did lots of research and I knew what to do to mix alcohol with certain pills, and I was ready, and off I went with my pills, my alcohol, my plan, and a pad of paper and a pen to write suicide notes. And um, took myself somewhere quite away, lived in a very remote place on an island in New Zealand at the time. And I didn't pick the destination in advance. I just spontaneously drove to a remote location, and I definitely wanted to carry through this act. It was not an attempt for attention or wanting someone to rescue me. I made sure I was going to be able to get somewhere and carry this through. Um, Over a several hour period of time, I sat in my SUV um, on a beautiful bluff looking down over the ocean and wrote suicide notes. And the last one that I wrote was to whoever was going to discover my body, assuming it was probably going to be an EMT or a land worker, and apologizing to them for that being their job, which really was in my heart at the moment. And by this stage, I could feel the medication kicking in and the alcohol, and knew to get in the back of the SUV and lay down. So I proceeded to do so. And having been raised Catholic and living with the idea that suicide was a sin and I would be going to hell, I just remember saying over and over and over in my head, probably merely as an act of um, justification more than prayer. Um, I know that God is a loving God. I know that this will be forgiven. And then I just kept asking, are you still breathing? And this wasn't an audible conversation. This was just
Mhm.
something I kept saying over and over in my own head. Um, and I don't know how long that went on for, because again, the medication and alcohol had kicked in, but I just remember feeling a little queasy. And the next thing I knew, I was feeling sensation, and outside of the SUV and outside of the car, very heavy popping sounds, a lot of pressure, and looking down at the body, watching the body, and recognizing that I wasn't attached to it. There was no um, attachment to what it was going through. There was no sadness about it. There was no regret. There was no, I've got to get back in there. It was really more of a curiosity, I think is a good
Mhm.
word to describe it. Just kind of naturally curious, almost like I was watching a movie, like what's happening with that thing down there?
Did you feel any empathy with your body?
None, none. There was no empathy with the body, no empathy with what was happening. There was no thoughts that it was wrong or right. There was no, I want to get back in there. There was no, where am I going next? Like there was, it was just kind of witnessing or watching is how I would describe it, with the realization that I was no longer in a body. I was an energy, and really no curiosity about that either, which to this day I know is because now I understand that we do that all the time. We just have no recollection that we're
Mhm.
doing that. And the SUV was like there was no top to it, and I was just above it, looking down, seeing the body writher and seeing the body seemed to struggle, but not feeling any of that. There was no pain, no suffering, no empathy or sadness for that body. Um, and obviously there was just not a whole lot of interest in sticking around, because the next thing that happened was just more of that popping, cracking sound. Very much, I would describe it like it was in the ears, but there were no ears. It was so audible. It permeated me. And what I describe in most of my near death is that it wasn't that I was hearing it, I was it.
Right.
I was the energy of the popping. I was the energy of the sensation of pressure. I was the energy of all of it. Whatever was being experienced, I wasn't separate from that. So the sensation of an upward pull and cracking and this thrusting, if you will, into this next area that was just darkness. There was no fear about it. There was no, oh my gosh, I'm in purgatory or I'm in hell or what's
Mhm.
going on. None of that was going on. In fact, there was no direct correlation with what seemed to be the experience and the identity of Kelly, which is why I now refer to myself as the story of Kelly, because there's real knowing that they are very much two separate things.
Right.
Again, don't know the amount of time that was spent in this darkness. I just remember feeling a tremendous amount of love. I felt held. I wasn't a body. There was no concern for what was apparently going on with the other thing, the entity of Kelly. There was no concern about this being where I might be stuck. I just felt held and loved.
Did
The
you
only
feel
way
any? Did you feel any presence?
not in that darkness, no. And I will say why I think that is, because I truly believe that's where I was part of what I refer to as nothingness or everythingness. So there's nothing separate there.
Right.
Why there's just this permeation of complete and utter love. So I would describe that to me in my mind as the most beautiful connection to a God source or a God energy or a universe energy, whatever you refer to it as, the everythingness or nothingness.
Yeah.
No duality at all. There's no separation at all. There's just an experience and not even an experiencer.
Mhm.
So again, no correlation or connection to understanding what amount of time was spent there. And the next recollection I had was this thrusting, popping energy again, and this sensation of pulling up. No body to be pulling, just this awareness of all of this. And again, I was it. And then just this beautiful, what I describe as a baby pink, and it's a color we just do not have here.
Mhm.
Everything that I point to, that I speak of, I have to use language to point to it. But I say often when I speak of this, there's no words that point to what I will share with you.
Right.
So it's kind of like clanging about with this clunky ability we have to communicate, where if telepathically I could just show you, would be more in alignment to what I now recognize.
Mhm. Okay.
So this beautiful, very, very, very light pastel pink that I've never been able to see again. And again, I wasn't witnessing it, I was it. This amazing smell, which again, I wasn't smelling it, I was it. The closest thing I've linked to it was almost like a gardenia smell,
Mhm.
floral. Auditable, what I would call angelic music, but not music. Just I was it. Just so much beauty, an overwhelmed feeling, recognizing I wasn't a body, no fear about it. And then this relationship is the best word I can think of, or realization that I was unfolding. This energy if you were to imagine your body being, constricted inside of a tin can, and all of a sudden somehow you're not. And even though you're not a physical entity, just this expansion, this feeling of, I get to spread out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it felt like. Just this energying
Mm-hmm.
so prolifically.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So go ahead.
so again, no presence other than what you were feeling yourself, or were being yourself. But did you actually come across another presence eventually?
Yeah. So again, no real understanding of how long I was in this space. I did start to recognize that just by, again, words challenging, thinking the thought, there was no thinker. There was just this, a thought would arise and then I would be there, or a thought would happen and then the outcome of that was the experience. So in some way, again, I correlate this to when we're not in ego, when we're not in a conscious state, this is a very normal pattern and rhythm for us to do. And I think that that aspect or energy knew that. And so it didn't take time to understand how to manipulate or work with the energy of itself, is the
Right.
best way to describe it. And there was just this knowing that there was more to happen here. The next thing I realized was a sensation of that. There's more to happen here. And I see off what I would call in a distance. Again, words are so hard, but it wasn't separate from me, but in this moment appeared separate. And I now know it to be Archangel Gabriel. And I just had this knowing that that's where I was to go, to follow. And so that's what happens. Just this energy of movement without any body to move. Because I never presented in any form to myself in this experience at all. There was never a body for me. I was just the pink or
Mm-hmm.
the smell or the sound.
Yeah.
In the gentle waving of Gabriel, which I knew was follow, there was just following happening. There wasn't an identity that was following. I'll pause in case you have questions there.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, so no communication going on at that time, even telepathically?
No, I mean, like I said, just the knowing to follow, and that was all that needed to happen. It was a knowing. It wasn't, conversation. I had many experiences. I've spoken with about a lot of them in my near-death video series, but with this particular portion, if you will, there wasn't a dialogue. There wasn't a. It was just
Right.
come.
Did you recognize or feel any other presence, say from relatives or
I
people
did.
you knew?
Yeah, I did have that experience, I would say later, further on in the dialogue. And I don't ever go back and watch my near-death experience, and a lot has happened since then. So I will preface this by saying some of this is stuff that's happened since, and some of it is stuff that happened then. And even 12 years later, I'm still getting downloads because I think a lot happened that I didn't bring back with me in a knowledge form that's
Mm-hmm.
now coming in packets of information, including, further elaborating on a relationship with, I now know to be my birth guide, Bernadette, who we do a lot of collaborative work together. And at that stage, there was no interaction with any of that. There was just come. And that was when I would call it, the life review. That's what other people have referred to it as. Again, people have put names against everything that's happened.
Yeah.
For me, I try not to label any of it because to this day, I don't understand it.